everybody. My name is Toni and Marcolini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I love authors. I love Robert Dugoni, who I always gush out every time he's on the podcast talking about his books. But today I have two more authors with me who collaborated with Bob on his recent novel. So I'd like to say welcome, Chris Crabtree and Jeff Langholz. I hope I said your name right, Jeff. Did I get that right?
Close, close enough. It's Langholz.
As somebody with the name Marcolini who's endured that, for a lifetime, I feel your pain.
Right.
So I read your book. It's definitely different, right, Bob, than what you would ordinarily write. Let me say this. Let me begin by saying that this is absolutely Pulitzer Prize winning worthy material. And I honestly would be very surprised if you weren't in contention. It is an exceptional read. It's a hard read to get through without being upset. Honestly, I think maybe the women will have, and I don't know, but maybe the women will have a harder time than the men getting through it because you're very graphic. Without giving spoilers, I will say that, it's really a story about these two people, it's a couple, unmarried from Minnesota. World War II happens, Pearl Harbor happens, more specifically, World War II is going on already. But Sam, the lead character, winds up in the middle of the war. He gets captured as a prisoner of war in Japan, and you graphically go into what he endures. Now, in and of itself, that's somewhat of a love letter to every veteran who's endured, right? Every veteran who has PTSD and went through that to make this country what it is, right? To allow for freedom. And for every veteran who's done that, this is somewhat of a love letter saying, we know what you went through and we want to give it, voice. So that part's absolutely there. There's a young lady who's somewhat brilliant, I guess, in her math skills, certainly, who winds up also in this country, beginning called to Washington for her math skills, and how she can help the country with the war. And so there's the book happens simultaneous where we keep going back and forth between those two worlds and seeing the very different experience these two people are having. But it is literature at its finest. And it was such an important story to tell. And I couldn't think of another book that told it that way, right? That told it with the level of, I don't want to say graphicness, but maybe that's it, but told it with the level of detail that you can feel kind of pouring off the page. And it's wow, it's such a compelling read. So I'll begin by saying that to everybody. Congratulations. You really put something magnificent together.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
And so from there, I'll go, somebody had to be the beginning of this story, right? Somebody had this idea. So why don't you tell me who had the idea and how it came to you?
Mr. Crabtree?
Well, thank you. Thank you. You put an apple in my throat, so I'm going to do my best to get us started here. There wasn't one of the characters in Hold Strong, Father Thomas Cecina.
Father Tom.
Father Tom. There hasn't been a moment in my life that I did not know that name. Not a moment. I had three older brothers. Grew up on the east side of Indianapolis, Indiana. I knew what grade school I was going to go to, and I knew what high school I was going to go to. And I went to Father Thomas Cecina Memorial High School. And some years ago, a little bit more than a decade ago, I was writing another project, working on another manuscript that had a Catholic priest as a character, and I through my research to try to write this completely fictional account, I met the real story of Father Tom, and found out. I always knew that I had this legitimate war hero that even my own grandmother, my mother's mother, knew him, met him, went to masses that he told, and she used to call him handsome Father Tommy. And so I had always my mother was about 3 or 4 when he was at St. John's the Evangelist Parish in downtown Indianapolis before he joined the military. And so there's not been a time where I wasn't familiar with this guy, but I certainly wasn't. And I knew he was a legitimate war hero, but I didn't know his story. And as I started to get little pieces of it, I went to a bar with my good friend Jeff Langholz, who had come down to Costa Rica, and so I was telling him this story that I wanted to put together about this incredible priest. And I kind of want to hand the baton off to him because I pulled his string, and he took off with, well, I think I embarrassed him is what I did. Would that be a good word for it, Jeff?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. So from there, like Chris said, I was visiting him down in Costa Rica where he lives and where he is right now. And I'm about to wrap up the visit, and Chris tells me this incredible story, what he's learned about this true story about this Catholic priest from Indianapolis, after whom his high school is named. And we're at a bar, beachside bar, about to spit up my beer. And I signaled to the bartender, we're going to need another round here. And I said, tell me the whole story, Chris. He told me the story, what he'd unearthed so far. And I said, more people need to know about this. This is a story that needs to be out there. And as Chris suggested, I was a little embarrassed because I was a history major in college, specializing in military history. I took a whole class on World War II. And this whole chapter of Japanese prisoner transport ships, these so-called hell ships, wasn't anywhere. I've also seen every World War II movie that Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg have made, and before them, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. Nothing on this. And so I was a little embarrassed that this had slipped through the cracks, slipped past not just me, but all the great storytellers of our generation. And so Chris and I committed to trying to bring this story to the world. And we worked on it and worked on it and worked on it for a long time, researching and writing. And then it made sense after a while to join forces with an established author, somebody like Bob Dugoni, who could help make sure the quality of the storytelling was on par with the quality of the underlying story.
Which was quite a challenge, to be honest, because I don't know that I've ever encountered a story so well documented. And it was really a challenge to include all of that documentation in terms of the reality with the fictional characters, because I didn't want to blow it. I didn't want to make a mistake. And Jeff and Chris were both very gracious about reviewing the manuscript and saying, we do have documentation that this is what was said in the hold of the ship, and you cut those lines. And I went, okay, let's put them back. It was a very humbling experience because it was a matter of Jeff was very gracious to say to make the writing as quality as the research, but I was working with a manuscript that was very well developed, had some incredible characters, and really what I was just doing was trying to, as Jeff said, just trying to raise it up a little bit more, make the characters more compelling, make some of the circumstances a little bit more compelling, using the techniques that I have developed in writing thrillers, and that I've developed writing literary novels. I've been fortunate to be able to write in a number of different genres. But I can remember saying to my wife on more than one occasion, man, I hope I don't screw this up.
Well, you absolutely didn't screw it up. I mean, it's got such just a lovely flow to it, right? You feel in any instance, you feel like you're there, right? It was very easy to get lost in the novel. And then, I mean, like I said, honestly, there's some scenes when you talk about the Japanese ships, and um, there's some scenes that it's hard to get through. Um, it's a slightly emotional. It's really hard to read in that sense. Mm, but you almost can't stop, right? You feel like you're there with them, and you just have to know, like there's just something so empathetic I felt that came out like while I was trying to endure getting through, and I had to know like how this plays out. And Bobby did your usual. You created these characters that's just easy to love and are very well developed. Um, and
But
I thought
again,
it just weaved together. There's just there's that perfect amount of like sort of like you're telling this bigger story, but then there's this you broke it down to these two people and their lives, right? At the end of the day, it does feel like it's about these two people, right? Separated by war, but together somewhere, in their heart or in their minds. Um,
I think that was sort of the brilliance of what Jeff and Chris created originally, is they took a world event and they boiled it down to the impact that it had on two people from a small town living small lives, if you will, during the heart of the Depression. What did it mean for the average man and woman to go through something like that, to have their world completely upended, completely turned over? When I read the first 50 pages and I read about Sam being a projectionist, showing Fred Astaire and Ginger Roger movies in the Paradise Theater in Eagle Grove, Minnesota. I mean, there were so many movies. It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Jeff turned me on to a movie the other day called The Majestic Theater. Uh, and it just, at the same time that it's difficult to read, it's one of those stories that you want to read. It is like A Wonderful Life, and you want to see the characters come out okay. We had a little bit of a tug of war with the editor about the ending of the story. They wanted to end the story early, and I said to Jeff and Chris, "No, you created a cinematic picture here, and we need a cinematic ending." And we kind of stuck by our guns. And people that have been early readers of the book have been really love the ending, because I think in a world turned upside down and in a world that was so dark and so horrific, that ending brings hope, and that, I think that's important.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess really at the end of the day, that's the recurring theme throughout the book, right? In your darkest hour, hold on to her hope, because things have a way of passing, right? Things have a way of ending, and you can emerge on the other side. And that's something that holds true to for anybody, right? Somebody who's going through anything, cancer, the death of somebody, drug addiction. I mean, whatever your cross to bear is, whatever you are suffering at the moment, you can literally get that idea of what you're saying. Hope, always brings you back up to the surface, like hope, and then you can get through and you can get to the other end. So I definitely got that theme, running throughout in the darkest hour. And that's what's, I guess, was even more drawing, right? Because when they're going through the hard times, you want to be like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. What will this look like 30 years from now? And that's what was kind of going through my head. Like, what will this moment look like for you in 30 years? Because people don't endure things in a vacuum, right? You go through something in life and it ultimately always changes you. It changes who you are. It changes your outlook, and life keeps evolving in that way. Um, and our experiences make us who we are. And with a lot of those experiences, I imagine you have veterans who have PTSD, right? Who that is still a part of their life. What they endured however many years ago remains with them still. And I thought that was an important part of your story as well. And that kept running through my mind. When I was seeing some of the more horrific things, I was thinking, how does this look in this person's brain decades from now?
I think that's something Jeff can talk about, actually.
Sure, I'll be glad to. Yeah, the wars leave wounds not just on the outside, but also on the inside, obviously, including modern wars. And we wanted to address that head on. And so we did give our character what would be called PTSD today. And in the true underlying story, one of the actual individuals involved with this who survived the whole worst, deadliest accident in U.S. military history, he until he died in his mid-90s, he suffered from PTSD. He was 93 years old and having nightmares in the middle of the night and waking up in cold sweats decades after World War II ended. And so it really does affect people for the long term, as you say. And we wanted to go ahead and talk about that.
And the challenges, the challenges aren't just in the psychological realm, and Hold Strong touches on both even the physical and the spiritual even. So we're talking about the long-term health of these soldiers in not just their minds, it's also in their hearts and in their relationships with other people and even with their maker. And we wanted to touch on all of those aspects of human challenges that happened at wartime and with soldiers.
Have you had any veteran response?
Chris, maybe you could talk about your friend who read the book and.
I'm going to skip that one. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, we've had some. Bob met has an interesting anecdote to share about the daughter of a World War II soldier that would be relevant.
Yeah, it was really remarkable. It was a little eerie, to be perfectly honest, but it was also very cathartic. I had a good friend pass away unexpectedly just before Christmas, and I had always given him books to give to his mother's retirement home. And Carol was a friend as well, and so Carol came to visit me after Jeff had died. And I said, here, Carol, let me give you some books for your library. And here's one I think you should read. I think it's has a very uplifting message to it. It's a hard book. She said, what's it about? And I said, well, it's about World War II. And she said, I can't read World War II. My father died in World War II. I said, oh, I'm sorry. And she said, what's your book about? And I began to tell her that about a young man who grows up in a small town and he joins the National Guard, so he's not going to get drafted, and he gets sent to Kentucky and he's in a tank battalion, and they get shipped to San Francisco or to Tacoma, and from Tacoma to San Francisco, and from San Francisco they're on the SS Calvin Coolidge. They're sent to the Philippines, and her eyes are just getting wider and wider and wider. That was her father. Her father was in a tank division. He was from Ohio. He sailed on the SS Calvin Coolidge. He was on he was in the Bataan Death March. He was in the prisoner of war camps. He was transported on Japanese hell ships. And so I said, Carol, I can probably find you some information from the two men that did the research on this. They have unbelievable amounts of information. She said, please do. We never really understood fully what happened to him. So I emailed Jeff, and Jeff found him. He found the ship he was on, the two ships he was on. He survived the first ship, and he died at sea, the second ship, and he was buried at sea. And that was incredibly cathartic for her. And I, in the midst of her son dying, it was really great to be able to present her with something like, this is what happened to your father. And she gave the book to her remaining two sons to read, so they could understand who their grandfather was.
Sure. And what he endured.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't think, I would think veteran response, families of veterans, I would imagine is going to be relatively positive, because you do capture something. And as I said in the beginning, I couldn't think of another book that went into that sort of a detail, right? I mean, you really feel there because it's historical fiction at the end of the day. I mean, it's not like ordinarily you might read a nonfiction book about, World War II, and even if it tells you about a particular person, it's not quite the same. Um, then there's also fiction that I've read that have accounts of people who are in the war and when, while they're in, but I couldn't think of a single one that really had, oh my goodness, that level of detail that you felt you submerged into this world. Which is why I keep saying, I mean, the level of detail, the story, the way it plays out, absolutely Pulitzer Prize winning stuff. And I'd be stunned if this isn't in contention at a minimum for it. It's
Well,
so well written.
I think your listeners should also know that the amount of research that Chris and Jeff did that is in the book is only a fraction of the 10 years they devoted to this story. And Jeff has a website, it's jefflangholz.com. And readers and your listeners can go to that website and they can see photographs and they can see documents, the Japanese documents. And Jeff can really talk more about that. But there is a wealth of information, and I think your listeners and readers are going to be compelled to do that because the research these two men did is compelling.
And not at all available in modern day history class, which is also what struck me. Right? This is not the version that you hear or, hear about from your teachers or read about in the history books that they put out to teach history.
So Jeff tell about the research you did and when you found certain of those documents that were just no one had ever seen before.
Sure, sure. Well, all three of us did research. Bob, especially on the code breaking, Chris, especially on Father Thomas Cecina, and I did a lot of the hell ship research in between. And it was really long and difficult in many ways, but also exhilarating when you come across a needle in the haystack and find something, a missing piece of the puzzle, and hold in your hand an important document. It's just really, really exciting. And I think between the three of us, we gathered a lot of puzzle pieces together from around the world, from a village in China to a sunken submarine a mile below the surface of the South China Sea to the Philippines to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., to crawling around inside a real World War II Baleo-class submarine to get the layout. We have really tried to be as authentic as possible. And also, just for transparency, we did put over 470 research notes at the back of the book so
Yeah.
readers could follow the true underlying story chapter by chapter by chapter in the interest of transparency and helping them dive deeper.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, but you're right. I noticed that, which is very different from any historical fiction I've ever read. Right? I mean, you literally had a chapter by chapter um, background, if you will, or connection to real life stories that almost it doesn't go line for line, but I mean, you had a lot of stuff in there for each chapter that was a reference guide for somebody wanting to know more about it. But certainly saying these things really happen. Like we can call this historical fiction, but it's more history than fiction. And I thought that's what that message truly sent, where like this is real. This isn't just something we created in our head. Although we fictionalize these two people, their journey, very real. And I think what comes through from what you put at the end. Also kind of cool, right? To be able to go through that. I think I learned more about history after I came out of college than I did in all my years up until then, right? In my independent reading, taught me a lot more than what is taught, I think, in the classroom. And I don't know what that really says, but um, I think we do tailor down what we teach of each story a little too much, right? To not give a full picture of everything. Um, which is why I don't understand. Sometimes I'll talk to people who don't read nonfiction, like who don't read history at all, and I think, you're missing out, right? Because you need to go out and read some history and see what these true stories look like. So that's why to me it was so I mean, I didn't know what to expect, honestly, when I first got the book. I'm used to a certain style, I think, with Bob, and I didn't know exactly what to expect. I've been slightly prepared for something different, but I wasn't expecting to find what I found. And it was so compelling and just so weaved together with this sense of I'm watching this person go through history and it felt more real for me not reading about it in a historical way, but reading about it as this person endured it. So I'm going to say bravo to that too, because that's not an easy thing to capture. We all think we can write about something that we've heard about. And certainly movies have been doing it for years. You do Pearl Harbor and you write about what it feels like to the people who've been, but not like what you did, right? There's still always that fictional aspect to it. That's not what comes through. I really felt like this was real and I was going through it. I think is another spectacular work from Bob, but I guess adding Chris and Jeff into the picture certainly really made this story pop. It's magnificent.
Yeah, no, and don't I want to just be clear here that if we could have fit all three names the same height and width on the front cover of the book, we would have. Now, obviously, my name has some cachet because I've written 30 books, and hopefully that will bring readers to the story. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I give all of the credit and all the applause to Jeff and Chris. My job was to try to get the writing to the level of research that they performed. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that you are not going to see a novel that has this level of research. Probably, I don't know, unless you're talking Mishner, who had a whole team of researchers behind him. But this is a remarkable journey by these two men, and I'm just very fortunate to have been a part of it.
I have to know, I was curious, how obligated did you feel or responsible did you feel to tell to get this right? Right? Because you were telling ultimately really true stories, not identical to Sam's, but pretty close, right? People did endure exactly what you wrote about. What's the sense of obligation you felt to get that right?
Well, I think that's really a question for Jeff and Chris, because not only did they do, the down and dirty research in the National Archives, they also interviewed a lot of the family members of people that had been there. And so that's another weight that's on, your shoulders to get it right. So that's probably a better question for Chris and Jeff.
Yeah, I was opening it up to the three of you. I wasn't really
Yeah,
forcing Bob to answer me.
this is that precisely what you said. I mean, from the first reckoning, um, of what I was seeing in front of my eyes, I felt a tremendous amount of weight about this story because I knew it had not been told, and I think it was Maya Angelou that talked about the anguish or the agony of carrying an untold story. And Jeff and I worked on this thing back and forth for a decade. And we spent a great deal of time, Jeff more than me, inside the belly of that ship. And it was we did feel the pressure, we felt the responsibility, but also the honor of being able to tell such a compelling story. So we feel blessed that this team came together to be able to do what we all feel like it's going to do.
Was it hard to let go of the book, when you were finally done after such a long journey?
If you're still asking me, the word I have is relief. I feel relieved to have it where it is right now. I feel very, very, very proud, because my initial motivation to do this is that people have to see it. They have to know who Father Tom was. They have to know what these soldiers endured. They need to know that. They need to know that war is hard. That it is that it breaks families. That it builds relationships. They needed to know that, and I think I'm proud to be on a team that has done that.
Wow. Yeah. I would think so. I would think that that's, how a person would feel. I also think I would have had a hard time when I finally had to let it go, right? Sort of when you live with something so long and you work on it, it kind of becomes your passion. And you never think it's quite good enough, right? You never think it's quite ready. You always think, there's something more I can do to make this more perfect than it is. So that's why I was wondering, like, if any one of the three of you had that sense of, when you were letting it go, like maybe there's a little something, or just kind of like, no, we got it, we've nailed it, we're done.
Jeffrey Deaver said that if he could, he'd hang by his ankles over the printing press and make changes and corrections as the book was being published. I think you're always going to have us. I know for myself, when I let go of Sam Hell, I felt like I was leaving good friends behind,
Yeah.
and I just felt, that I got to know Sam and Sarah so well, and so honestly, and to know that their journeys were true, was really compelling for me, and just emotional when we got that contract and it was going to come to fruition. It was very compelling for me, and I think even more so for these two gentlemen, to know that this story they had worked so hard on, they were going to, and the families that they had spoken to, that they were going to bring, like my friend Carol, they were going to bring this to light. They were going to bring this to the public, and I that had to be incredibly cathartic for them.
I mostly,
Yeah.
if I could just chime in, I mostly feel just gratitude that we've reached this point and that story is coming out. This story fell into the laps of a couple of rookie authors, unfortunately, and fortunately, it has attracted the right people on its journey. Bob's a busy guy, as you know. He's like a one-man book of the month club, cranking them out. And here we were able to, Bob was willing to join the team. And then our agency was just, our literary agents were incredibly supportive, very patient throughout the process. And then our publisher as well was so impressive in terms of insisting on quality, everything through the editing process, everything else. It's just really attracted. This is a special story, and it's attracted the right people to it. And I'm just so thrilled and grateful that it's finally out in the world.
And I have to say, before I can let any of you go, I have to say that I was thrilled that you paid an equal amount of attention to Sarah. Right? Because women get lost in this, any World War II story I've ever read, whether it be historical fiction or fiction or nonfiction. You don't really hear about what I think sometimes can be the unsung heroes, right? You never hear about the women. And I think you put a lot of attention into the fact that, oh my goodness, at that time there was somebody who was a woman who was smart and contributed in a way that is virtually unrecognized in my mind. I mean,
Fred,
there's some intention now, right? There's some good books coming out now where you hear about the unsung heroes and, NASA and this and that, like who, the mathematician women who were behind. But you hear about that now. How many decades have we gone to get to this point to start giving women their due or their credit for what are contributions made 100 years ago? So I thought I liked that a lot, right? I liked that you gave some equal attention to her and some attention to the fact that, hey, women played a role too. Women had contributions that were invaluable.
there was no Fred without Ginger, right? And
Otherwise, Fred's just jumping around.
that's really what Chris and Jeff, kind of pulled together in that theater. There was no Fred without Ginger. And, while it's a book that you could say it's like Unbroken, Laura Hillenbrand's blockbuster, it's also The Imitation Game, right? It's Sarah's story as well. You could do a movie on each of them, and they would be compelling movies. So we're, fingers crossed, someday this will have that same experience, and they'll be able to do a movie on both of them, but together. And I think as you just said, I think Sarah's contribution is more than worthwhile. It was essential. Those young women had a job, which was to end the war. And had they not done their job, we probably would not have ended the war the way that it ended and when it ended. So they were incredibly important.
Yeah.
And
And I think the
just
book loses something without her. I mean,
right, and
if you were just telling his story, it wouldn't be what it is.
And the nature of her position has kept that group of women in the shadows for a very long time, because it was a secretive work, very secretive work. And I think that everybody would agree that in in World War II itself, the Pacific theater is less it got less attention than the European theater, and so there are some lesser known stories that get woven together in Hold Strong.
Sure. And I like that what you said, in the shadows, because so many of those stories are in the shadows. Um, and so I liked that a lot too. I think that will draw readers to you as well. This is a strong woman, during this time in history, so often not given credit. And you won't. That's not how this book is. You get to see a strong woman. You get to see a strong man, and endure. Right? They endure. And if that's not the essence of humanity, right? Enduring what gets thrown your way.
Well, there were so many different heroes, Tony, and I don't think we do justice if we don't mention the heroic efforts of Father Tom Cecina, which Chris.
Oh, I mean, yeah, by all means.
Because here was a man that didn't have to be there. That's the most shocking thing that I learned through the research I read on by Chris and Jeff, is that he did not have to be there. He was an army chaplain. The Japanese would have excused him. He didn't have to be on those ships. He did it because he did it for his fellow men. He wanted to be with those men, to raise them up, give them hope, give them faith, not let them lose their humanity in an inhumane situation. So he is a remarkable human being. And somebody once said to me that God doesn't create heroes, circumstances do. But here's a situation where you might have both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Father Tom is I would say a main character in the book. He's not even, if it was a movie, I wouldn't even call him supporting, right? He's heavily involved. He's a main character in the book, and what an incredible character to find out that that's based on really there was a Father Tom. Um, is I don't even know. I'm speechless. I mean, to find out that this person actually existed, he really does make a difference. And imagine intentionally doing so, right? Those again, unsung heroes. Doesn't have to be there and is there. And wouldn't the world be a great place if all of us contributed in small ways where we were?
Yeah.
I hope, Tony, that's one of the messages readers take away from this book, is that they're all unsung heroes as well, and we all can live extraordinary lives, like the extraordinary life of Sam Howe. We can all do inspiring little things, one little thing at the time, like Father Tom's motto, give that little extra. And I hope that readers realize that as they face challenges in their life, they too can hold strong against the things that life throws their way. They too can prevail.
Yeah. Does Father Tom have any relatives that you were able to?
We haven't found any living relatives, and I did spend some time with speaking with the archivist Julie Matoika with the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, and she supplied me with some of the information, because at the time of this, and it may still be true today, that there isn't a Catholic school in the entire United States that's named after, and I'll use the words, just a Catholic priest. They're usually Monsignor, Bishop, Cardinal, Pope, Saint kind of thing. And here sits this humble little Eastside High School about this person whose spirit and faith and everything just kind of he dripped with this in a handwritten letter from a Catholic priest, actually his commanding officer in the chaplain's corps, Father John Duffy, that he wrote to the Archbishop of Indianapolis from a Bombay hospital bed on Red Cross paper, wrote a letter to him saying that, hey, I believe that you lost one of your beloved priests, and went through a couple of anecdotes about how he himself, Father John Duffy, was anointed on the Bataan Death March with last rites, because he got bayoneted twice on the Bataan Death March, anointed for last rites by Father Thomas Cecina. And it also it claims inside the letter that in the entire Philippine Chaplains Corps, Father Tom got more converts than the rest of the Chaplains Corps put together. And I have no reason to doubt those anecdotes from him, because every time you see this, he was one that ran toward the explosions.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. And you get that right from the beginning, right? When they're online walking and he's got the pocket knife, and you sort of get that sense from the beginning, the role Father Tom's going to play.
I'll just put it out there in case any of your listeners are willing to make a run at this, but to have a movement for Father Tom for sainthood, I think would be a worthy cause.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that certainly encapsulates the essence of Catholicism, right? To give, to serve, to love. Yeah. I hope we're starting something right now. I hope the campaign begins right now.
Me too.
I want to thank you all for coming and sitting and talking to me. It was my honor, really, to read this book. It was very humbling. We complain too often in life, about little things that we have to endure, and we raise it up into, oh my goodness, like I have to, and then you don't realize what really enduring can look like for some people. So I think that's humbling, and a really good bucket of water in the face for somebody who's belly aching about their life. And it was just the words are just magical. They shoot off the page. It really is just a magnificent read. I can't say it enough. And I hope you'll come back, like when you get that Pulitzer Prize, and like tell me how cool it was.
Fingers crossed from your lips to God's ears.
Yes. How appropriate.
So I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna
Thank
put
you,
a link
Toni.
to all your websites and to whatever we can for the book. It is, I can't emphasize enough, if you haven't gotten it so far, it's a worthy read. It's the best piece of literature I think you'll find in a very long time. So do it, buy it, read it, and then maybe say a prayer of gratitude would be appropriate.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Toni.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.